That's the second biggest monkey head I've ever seen.
I used to be an adventurer like you. Then I took an arrow in the knee.
The definition of insanity.
Hello and welcome to episode 56 of PvA Radio. I am one of your hosts, Luke Croft. Joining me, as always, freelance gaming journalist Cody Mellocline. Cody, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm feeling a little tired, a little overworked, but other than that, can't complain.
Those are like the two biggest complaints you can have, though.
But fetching is in my blood, so I got to do it.
Also, joining us today, as always, amending his Abolish the Sun, he is adding also Abolish September, October 61-day month.
I'm here for it. Let's do it.
All right, that's Larry Hunt, ladies and gentlemen. Larry, how are you doing?
I'm great. We're getting into that fall. The evenings and the mornings here are beginning to be cool.
And then it's like, fuck you, it's 95 degrees.
Yeah, I don't know what you guys are talking about. This is not fall.
Well, you're from Boston. It's probably already like 40 in the mornings up there. So
yeah, it's great.
Gosh, I'm very jealous of that. I want that so bad.
Yeah. Luke and I both hate the heat.
Mm-hmm. Mostly because I've got like 17 layers on me, and I'm not talking clothes. So.
That took me a second.
But guys, this is PvA Radio. We get together each and every week over here on twitch.tv/PvA Radio at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Each of us brings one of the biggest gaming news.
9:30.
What did I say?
8:30.
I'm drunk on this water.
On power.
I can switch the scenes, guys. I've got so much power, unlimited power.
Put me in a sandwich shop.
Oh, man. At 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time over here on twitch.tv/PvA Radio, where each of us brings one of the biggest gaming news stories of the week to the table. Then we have an in-depth discussion about it. Consider it your collaborative audio feature article, or your CAFA, if you will. And Cody, what do we want people to do with that?
We want people to spam that emote in the chat and just yell it to the wind.
Yes.
Like a rooster call in the morning. Wake your neighbors up.
If you can't catch us live on Twitch, you can watch us the very next day on youtube.com/PvA Radio, where we post the entire episode, or you can watch it topic by topic where we break it out. Or if you prefer listening to our sultry voices and not just looking at us, you can listen on podcast services everywhere, including Apple Podcast, Spotify, Luminary with Conan O'Brien over there, you know.
Revolutionizing.
Podcast revolution.
Dude, Luminary is everywhere right now. Like, I listen to a lot of podcasts that are like, hey, we've got an exclusive mini-series on Luminary.
The Ringer is doing a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, so.
I'm real tempted by Spooked. Like, it is the one thing that makes me possibly want to pay for some podcast service.
Wait, what do they have?
So if you haven't listened to Spooked, it is a fantastic spooky podcast that only happens in the fall every year. From what? I'm blanking on the name of the group.
Blue Man.
Nope, that's not it. But it doesn't matter. Just look up Spooked. But this year, so usually they have like 10, 13 episodes, something like that. This year they have 26.
Wow.
But half of them are Luminary exclusives. So
Do you have to pay for Luminary?
For the premium content. It's like you can pay for a month. It's like a monthly subscription service like Hulu or Netflix, but you get all these premium podcasts that you have access to. Which doesn't appeal to me, but I love Spooked so much that it might pull me in for a month.
Speaking of paying for content, guys, it is September over here on Twitch, which means for the entire month of September, for first-time subscribers to channels, your first month is half off. So it's $250. The cool part about it is, guys, we still get the same exact payout we would for those subs as if you were paying full price for them. So the way it generally works is you pay $5 for a sub, Twitch takes half, and then the creator gets half. During September, when you pay $250 for a sub, all 250 of that comes straight to us as creators, which is really cool. So you guys get a great discount, and it doesn't impact the money that we're making. So if you're watching us over here on Twitch and you want that sweet Katha emote to spam in the chat, go ahead. Now is a great time to be a first-time subscriber, because you can do that for half off. So also join us for the PvA Nightly Rundown every single weeknight except for Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time over here on Twitch.tv. Getting into the groove, guys. My break last week was a good one. It was a needed one. I was getting a little run down. Yesterday we had a whiteboard. We mispronounced Dave Bautista's name a million times, and we talked about illegally crossing the Canadian border. So in order to confront Yves Guillemot, so and then got a $40,000 raise from Yves Guillemot. Pretty good night, I'd say. All right, but make sure you come and watch that live. It's a fun time. You can also watch that on youtube.com/PvA Radio. But guys, it looks like for the second week in a row, we've got a lot of games to talk about, which is surprising because we don't normally, but it's a video game podcast and we're actually playing video games. So
let's get into the season.
Let's get the week started like we get every week started with what have you been playing? And Larry, mixing it up, let's start with you this week.
It's a lot of pressure, but all right. I've played some Overwatch, and every week I talk about how much I'm loving that game again, so I won't bore you with those details. I'm loving that game again. I also played the Man of Medan. I'm sorry, I always say it wrong because I like it when it rhymes. The Man of Medan. And I love that game. So when I was a kid, I read Choose Your Own Adventure books all the time. Like that, it was one of my favorite things to go to the library and get Choose Your Own Adventure books. And so like I've been explaining this game to some of the teenagers that I work with. And when I bring up Choose Your Own Adventure books, they have no idea what I'm talking about. Apparently that's not really a thing that kids do anymore. But
oh, really?
Yeah. A lot of kids don't read at all.
I was going to say, are you talking read or just or just the books, the Choose Your Own Adventure books?
And then if they do read, there's a chance that they don't read things with actual pages. So I don't know if Choose Your Own Adventure books work. It seems like they'd work better in that medium, actually.
Yeah, because then you could just touch screen it.
Yeah. Come on, R.L. Stein. It's time for a comeback.
Is R.L. Stein still alive? He is, right?
So. Yeah. He was like, he made a cameo in the Goosebumps movie.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, so Choose Your Own Adventure, always been my jam. And essentially that's what Man of Medan is. It's a Choose Your Own Adventure movie. I kind of like that there's not a whole lot of focus on me running through and beating stuff up and shooting things. It's just, can I make the right decisions to pull these people through to the end? And the game's kind of slow getting started, laying the foundation, but once you get onto that ship, like it takes off and it gets real spooky real fast. It made me jump several times, so I'm having a lot of fun with it so far. I haven't gotten to the end yet, but I've also not lost anybody. Everybody's still alive in my story.
And when he says ship and take off, he's not referring to a space shuttle. So
correct.
He's talking about a boat in the story is what takes off. Ship.
Train on the water, boat on the tracks.
There's a 20-year-old Family Guy reference.
And then the last game that I played, I'm gonna have to consult the notes because I'm blanking. Oh, Apex Legends. I did jump back and start playing some Apex again. And I'm still in the boat of I'm not going to pay them for any more content because I don't appreciate the things that they had to say, but I just can't shake the fact that I love the gameplay of the game. And I'm having a blast playing it. The event that they have going on right now, the Voidwalker event, they have a special game mode that I think you would enjoy, Luke, because it's essentially shoddy snipers, and armor is hard to come by, and if you find armor at all, it's going to be white armor. So it's a very it's a much more realistic fighting experience.
That's cool. Although my biggest problem with battle royales is the fact that I die to people that I never saw. So it just sounds like that's going to add more to that.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. Cody, what have you been playing?
I'm continuing my play of Control. And I feel like I've just fallen further down the rabbit hole with this game. The more I get into the meat of the story, the more they just kind of unfurl layers of this world and the more interesting it gets. Um, I'm just completely obsessed with this game. I was literally playing it before I got on the podcast. I'm not very good at always measuring how far into a game I am, so I don't think I'm too close to the end. But they continue to reveal mysteries, and they continue to not answer those mysteries in very intriguing ways, stringing me along, and not in a cheap way, but a kind of an organic way. I'm just loving it, and I do think the gameplay is getting a little stale, but just when I thought that, I unlocked another power, and it kind of changed things up, and they started throwing different enemies at me, so I'm still loving that game. And then I also started Man of Medan. I literally just got to the ship, so most of it has been steady build up. And I actually... So I was playing with my girlfriend because she really liked Until Dawn. And I think that's what these games are great for. They're great at getting people who usually won't play games to play, as you said, basically an interactive movie. I think the opening sequence is a lot weaker than in Until Dawn. The sequence during World War II, I believe, that's kind of like the prologue. Mostly just because I don't know what was going on with the performances, but they were just pretty terrible. But sorry, go ahead.
I want to weigh in on the prologue real quick. I told Luke this in talking about it. I forgot about it till you brought up the prologue, though. The prologue is essentially the tutorial on how to play the game.
Yes.
And it just drags on entirely too long. It shouldn't take that long to tell me how to play the game.
Yeah. And I guess where Until Dawn threaded the needle in the prologue of revealing a threat that you thought would be the threat and then kind of turning the tables halfway through the story, I feel like they revealed too much about what the threat is without actually revealing anything at all, and I don't care. It's just, I don't know, creepy kids, I feel like, are an overdone thing, but I've heard that it gets there's like a whole menagerie of beasts that pop up in this game, so I'm not going to hold that against it. But once it got to like the meat of the story, which I guess I haven't even gotten into, but just laying the foundation of characters, I actually like a lot more that the characters aren't types like they were in Until Dawn. I think that worked for the story they were telling in Until Dawn because it was riffing on an 80s teen slasher, but here where they're trying to keep it at least somewhat more grounded and a little bit more self-serious, it works to kind of build these characters out of something a little bit stronger than an archetype. And so I'm already finding myself drawn to specific characters. I'm doing the couch co-op version with my girlfriend, where you assign characters to different players and they play as those characters, and the notice will flash up on the screen when the game wants you to switch the controller to another player's hands. I think that's pretty fun. I'd love to play it online. I'd love to do that with one of you guys, but it seems like a really great opportunity to kind of play and experience the game in a different way. But I'm enjoying it so far. I can't wait to dig back more into it this weekend. I'm hoping to finish it up this weekend.
Did everyone make it alive to the boat?
Yeah,
for you?
I do know. I'm aware of one part that I was playing where someone could have died.
I believe that there are two, but I'm not positive. I hope to find out on my second playthrough where I just try to kill everybody.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I almost killed Sean Ashmore's character, but he did not die. Which, unfortunate, because he's kind of a douche, but...
So, Larry, you mentioned there's a lot less in the way of, like, gameplay. Is it still Until Dawn levels of exploration within the levels, or is it pretty straightforward, like cutscene to decision, cutscene, then decision?
No, there's exploration. There's walking around, and you can choose. Like, there are points where you can choose to spend time talking to people or not spend time talking to people, and it affects the relationships. It affects the attributes. So I've played through up to the point of the ship twice now, because I started a game with my wife, and I started one that I could just stream by myself. And just eliminating her, like, things are already going quite differently, even though I don't feel like I've made a whole lot of different decisions. So it's still there. It's just that the scale of the game is a lot smaller, so there's not as much space to explore. Until you get to the ghost ship, you're just on one tiny boat, with the exception of going on a dive underwater once. So yeah, it's there, just not as prevalent.
Yeah, there are also just some weird. I forgot that this was the case in Until Dawn as well, because I guess I hadn't replayed it until recently. But there are just some weird like performance tics in the way that the actors perform their characters. Like the what's the nerdy brother's name? Brad.
Yeah,
they're like weird pronunciations of words that he makes. Like he'll say hermano. I don't know what the
Wait,
like,
what's he trying to say?
He's trying to say hermano, like brother. But he says the rest of the sentence correct, and then that one word is just weird. I think it's entertaining, and I think part of it is intentional. Just kind of it's kind of this off kilter kind of world, but I forgot about that. And then I also really like the curator idea, the guy who kind of shepherds you through the story, and apparently he's going to be a consistent part of this anthology, which I love the way he judges you at the end of every section.
Have you noticed him show up in the background at any point?
No, I haven't.
Oh man,
is that only on the ghost ship, or is that when you're on the boat as well?
The only time I've seen it is actually on the boat.
Oh, okay, cool.
So I'll tell you. There's no way for me to tell you where it happens without spoiling something.
All right.
So we'll avoid it for now.
Yeah.
As far as performances, some of the acting is not great, but for me it's the same way I felt about Until Dawn.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of part of the genre, the cheesy over the topness of things.
Yeah.
The game has had some performance issues for me, dropped frames here and there, textures popping in and out, and I've seen a lot of people having issues with that. I saw one person say that it actually cost her a character because she missed one of the quick time events. Well. But I haven't had it that bad. But it's just kind of annoying. And I wonder if the games are just a little too powerful for hardware that's been out for 7-8 years.
That happened on Until Dawn as well. Skipping frames
okay.
about that. It might just be their engine. But yeah, I haven't run into issues too severe. Like it hasn't broken the experience yet.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So for me this week, I don't want to linger here too long, but I want to rant for just a moment about Madden. So I didn't purchase Madden. I game share with a buddy of mine who bought it, and so I've been playing it. And the way that I normally play Madden is I will have an online franchise with some friends, and then I will have an offline franchise where, like, you know, I can play at my own pace. I'm not waiting on other people to play in order to advance. And then I'll do a career mode where I create myself as like a strong safety, and I play through franchise as a player, which is an option in Madden. Well, this year there is a mode in Madden called Franchise QB, where you play through like this really shittily written story about being a quarterback who plays the last 2 games of his senior year after never starting a game. And if you perform well enough, you can get drafted into the NFL. And then throughout the first preseason, you like have these objectives that your coach gives you, and you're trying to meet those objectives in your preseason games in order to secure a roster spot. Well, the problem is I like to play as a strong safety in a totally separate mode, the franchise mode, which is not franchise quarterback mode. They're 2 different things, right? But I started to notice when I was playing it that when I played through the first preseason game, my coach came back and was like, "Well, Luke, you just pointed out there you didn't throw for 150 yards and score 2 touchdowns." I'm like, what the fuck is he talking about? I play on defense. And I was like, okay, well, that's weird. I'll keep playing. So I played the next game. Same thing. Coach comes to me. Disappointing performance. You didn't throw for 200 yards and 3 touchdowns. So I played through all 4 preseason games. Oh, no, I played through the first 3 preseason games, and the coach comes to me and is like, "We're going to cut you." And I like begged for my job or something. He's like, "We're going to give you one more shot. You're going to only play 1 quarter, and you've got to throw for 100 yards and score 2 touchdowns. I'm like, what the fuck, man? So I get to the end of the game and obviously don't throw for that because, again, I'm on defense. My coach knows fuck all about football, apparently. And he's like, sorry, you just weren't good enough. And so he cuts me, and then it plays this scene that is meant to be in the franchise QB mode, where it goes to, like, they've got these live action segments that they recorded on the set of an actual, like, football discussion show. And they talk about, like, well, starting 2 games at quarterback in college doesn't always spell success in the NFL, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, what are they talking about? And then, so your player just gets cut. And you're not on a team anymore. And so I was like, well, let me see if I can, like, sim to the end of the year and sign with a team. Nope. Like, your player just retires after the first 4 games if you're not playing quarterback in this mode. That has nothing to do with franchise QB. And so I was like, this is, like, one of my favorite things to do in these games, is to play the career modes. And I'm not able to do this in this year's game. It's just total shit. And it was one of many bugs that I ran into this week, because I looked it up and people were like, oh, this has been a known bug since day one, and they just don't fucking care. Like, so there's another where, like, you load in, if you tell it to load in the real life rosters with, like, all the updated transactions and stuff into a franchise, it will also load in all of the games that have happened already's results. And so even if you play those games, it won't overwrite those results. It'll just be the real life score of that game. I'm like, what's the point of fucking playing the game if the score doesn't matter? Because it's been predetermined. So it's just Madden shit. It's always shit. And I refuse to spend any money on it until they show me that it's not going to be shit anymore. So I just imagine I'll never be spending money on Madden ever again.
Yeah, they don't really have a lot of competitors driving them to do any better.
Or a lot of incentive to touch these modes that don't generate recurring revenue. Like, that's the rub.
Wasn't it just a couple years ago where everybody was praising Madden's attempt at a narrative?
So Madden did have a mode called Long Shot, which was much...
That's what I'm thinking of,
yeah, it was 2 years, and it was much more of, like, a developed narrative with actual characters and a good storyline. Like, it was still kind of campy and sports movie-esque, but it was well written and well acted. This does not achieve the same thing. This is more just cutscenes. There's this weird, like... there's this weird relationship you've got with this sick girl. She's, like... It like from a Make-A-Wish Foundation that comes to your games, and she's like, can you throw 3 touchdowns in the national championship game for me? That's all I want. And so it'd be cool if that was the one time she asks, but she keeps coming back. And if you don't do it, you, like, have a phone call with her where she's super fucking disappointed in you. And I'm like, I can't live with this kind of pressure. I'm disappointing this virtual dying girl.
Artificial stakes.
Yeah,
that's really offensive too.
It's real weird.
So blatantly manipulative.
I don't really look at anything in Madden's narrative stuff, like, critically. But yeah, like, just as a mechanic in itself, is just annoying, because the cutscenes in that mode are unskippable, so you can't even, like, forgo the cringe within them. You have to bear it while you're playing the mode.
Yeah.
How can we make this story more compelling? Let's throw a Make-A-Wish girl in to, like, give you some missions. Who pitched that? That got pitched somewhere, and a bunch of people said, yeah, let's do it.
It's the conversation we constantly come back to here on PvA Radio, of, like, can we sit in on these boardrooms and figure out at least if there is a person in that room saying it's a bad idea? Because it would make me feel a little better about it if there was somebody, at least a voice of reason, at least being ignored.
I assume it was the writer who then had to write those scenes.
Oh man. Yeah, that's true. Are you guys sure about this? I got the brief for this section.
I think I'm reading this wrong.
Oh man.
High School Musical, the series, the musical.
All right, let's talk about some good games. I've been playing Astral Chain, and Cody was very surprised last week to learn that these are games that I would be into, which I surprised myself with being into these games.
Yeah, I didn't think it would be a loot game.
So Astral Chain is I don't know. I don't really agree with a lot of the praise that I'm seeing thrown around for it, and that is not to say that it is a bad game by any stretch of the imagination. So, but the whole concept of Astral Chain is like, you live in this world that has been decimated by these interdimensional beings, and the world has basically been reduced down to one island of civilization that for some reason up until that point was unable to be touched by these creatures called the Chimera. You are a police officer who works in a unit who has captured and kind of like tamed these Chimera with these astral chains, hence the name. And they're called legions. And these things like are an extension of yourself within the fight. And so the combat is really, really interesting. You can do a lot of really cool things as you power up throughout the game and start to build out your abilities. You can do a lot of cool things with the chain as well. Like you can, if an enemy's dashing, you can like cut them off with the chain and they get wrapped up in it, and you can auto attack them and stuff like that. There's a lot of really cool combos that you can do with your Legion. But there's essentially like, there's probably like 4 different pieces to this game. Like you have the exploration piece where you're in your police station. You can go to NPCs. They'll give you like real short missions that you can accomplish, and it just kind of fleshes out the narrative. Then there's the investigation piece where you go out into the field where the Chimeras have been breaking through and kidnapping people, and you have to interview civilians, and they give you information about the disappearances, and that gives you like where to start your search. And then the search aspect of the game has some puzzles built into it where you have to use your Legion and the abilities that you have with them in order to solve puzzles to find the Chimera that have kidnapped these individuals. And then there's the combat, which is to me the bright shining part of the game itself. To me, the pacing of the game is like really off. There is a lot of like Platinum does combat really, really well. If you've ever played, I really like Nier Automata. Really great combat. I know Bayonetta is praised for its combat as well. Like Platinum is known for their great combat, and this game is no different. But the problem is that those other 3 phases of the game, the exploring the police station, the investigation, and the puzzle solving, are just not all that engaging, and they take up a lot of time between fights. And so I'm probably about 4 or 5 hours into the game, and so maybe it starts to let up at some point. But it'd be one thing if I was learning really interesting things when I was talking to the civilians, but I'm not really. They're all essentially saying roughly the same things, like, oh, there's a red door, there's this ghost that's coming, people are disappearing, and it's all kind of samey. And it's just to me it's holding me back from the part of the game that I enjoy the most. And the story's not that compelling just because it's very anime in its story, and I'm not a big like anime story guy to begin with, but I think it leans on a lot of the tropes of it. Like you've got this brother who's just kind of like emotional and irrational, who's also kind of your avatar in the game. So you're a silent protagonist, which is a weird choice. And when people are talking to you, your brother will respond for you, which is strange. I'm like, why wouldn't the whole game is voice acted? This brother is voice acted. Why wouldn't you just give those lines to my character and let me stand on my own as an individual? So that was a weird choice as well, but I'm enjoying it, and hopefully some of those things will work themselves out as I get further into the game.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, after 4 or 5 hours in a game that's, I guess, as long as this one is supposed to be, I think the narrative can kick into high gear.
Yeah.
But based on what people have been saying about the narrative, or at least the characters, I'm intrigued. It sounds like an interesting setup for a world. I just don't. I thought the narrative and the idea and the follow through on Nier was so immaculate in so many different ways that I'm just intrigued as a kind of based on pedigree alone by what Platinum can do with this thing.
Yeah. So I'm sure I'll have more to report on it in the coming weeks. I'm definitely going to stick with it.
Looking forward to it.
And then I played probably about an hour and a half of Blair Witch on Friday. And Look, I'm going to be honest with you. I think a lot of this game is lost on me, having not seen the movie Blair Witch, the Blair Witch Project. And so there's probably plenty of it that would speak to me if I had watched it. But essentially, it's an investigation story. This boy has gone missing in the woods. You're playing as a character with this like traumatic background. He seems to have been like a former investigator who had something happen to him, and he was taken at least out of field work and given a retired police dog as a support animal. And you go to the woods where this boy went missing with your dog in order to aid in the search for it. And the dog actually becomes a pretty like interesting mechanic within the game. So he's kind of much like the Legion. He is an extension of yourself in the game. He
That's
is
all
your
good dogs are.
Yeah, he
and
is
much like your brother in Astral Chain. He answers for you when other people talk.
that's right. But you can send him on a search. He'll bring you items of interest that can lead you down the next path. When you're in combat with the monster in the woods, he will alert you as to what direction they're coming from so that you can try to shine your light on them to get them to go away. And so the dog plays like a really integral role in the gameplay itself. It's not just like this companion that walks around with you. Although his importance makes me fear all the more that if I continue to play this game, this dog is going to die. So, which I don't know if I could handle.
They better not do it.
They better not do it. But outside of that, it's very much a just walking simulator horror style game. You're going around, you're finding these red tapes that can alter reality. And so you're watching the tapes. And if you line it up with the place where the tape was filmed, you can like bring objects into reality that can serve as clues or like pieces to the puzzle to get you to the next phase. I mentioned there's combat in it. I'm not a big fan of when these kind of games have a combat mechanic in it because I think it takes some of the tension out of it. And the combat is just really, really weird. Like, so your dog is barking in the direction that the monster's coming from. You have to shine your light at it to get it to go away. And to me, it doesn't feel really satisfying. There was nothing about the combat that made me feel like, oh man, I accomplished something in this fight outside of just, I didn't have to restart the fight. But I don't know. I think it's a solid game for what it is in the genre that I'm sure people who have watched the movie will get far more out of than I was getting in my hour and a half.
So the little bit that I had seen before the game came out made me think that it was going to be similar to Slender. And hearing you talk, it sounds like it's more or less another Slender game. You're out in the woods, you're looking for clues. There's a monster you can't actually stop. You can just keep it from getting to you if you spot it in time. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So that's interesting to me. It's something I'd like to check out.
It's on Game Pass that you can get. Game Pass Ultimate, $2 for 2 months right now, guys.
Who made this game?
That's a good question. Let's see.
And why? Like, was anyone clamoring for more Blair Witch content?
It is made by Bloober Team.
Oh, they're the ones who made Observer, Layers of Fear, I believe.
Yeah, Layers of Fear, Observer, Basement Crawl.
I love Observer. I guess that's another thing. Like, this is a great team. I would rather see them work on something new than work on a licensed game with a property that seems like it's had all the air sucked out of it already.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't understand the timing of this game.
Well, and I think we had that conversation when it was revealed at E3 too.
Yeah.
That we were just like, Blair Witch, like, it's cool because it's known, but outside of that, like, who really thinks about Blair Witch right now?
And
Exactly.
even known though is a bit of a stretch. Like, I'm 30 and I barely remember that movie existing. Like, if this game had never come out, I might not have ever thought about it again.
Well, I mean, it's a pretty sizable, like, it had a meteoric impact on the industry. It's just it is ostensibly the first found footage horror film, at least the most successful one. But that's a genre that's been so predominant in not only horror movies, but like horror games where you kind of like film through a camera or you're finding footage. It just seems like it's now looping back on itself, and it's not nearly as enticing for people. And I'm sure they're like the generation below us has no idea what Blair Witch is, and maybe that's who they're targeting. I don't know.
Well, I've got an extension on Chrome called Keywords Everywhere that gives me search traffic when I search something on Google. And the Blair Witch Project gets searched 165,000 times a month still. So maybe there is something there.
Yeah.
Weird. I don't understand anything.
Yeah. I mean, people like this. The story behind that movie is actually more interesting than the movie itself.
But if it's something that interests you, I would definitely check it out. I don't think it fails in any real way in that genre. I think it does it all pretty well.
Plus, it's got a sweet doggo.
Yeah, and you can pet the dog, so.
Oh, yeah.
And there's multiple animations for petting the dog as well. So.
Oh, that's clutch.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, let's move on to our topics now that we're 35 minutes into this thing. I'm going to start for us. I want to talk about today's Nintendo Direct. I kind of have just a running list of all of the stuff that was revealed. I don't think I really missed anything here. I'm going to just hit some of the highlights for me, things that I kind of recognize as highlights. If there's something I'm missing that you think is big, feel free to chime in as well. They kicked it off with Overwatch coming to the Switch on October 15th. It's going to include motion controls so that you can tilt your console when you get tilted.
What?
Turn them off, correct?
I would imagine.
I hope so.
Yes, I would imagine that you can.
What do you control with it? Your movement?
You can control, like,
Aiming?
when you're ADS, you can aim with it. You can steer Junkrat's tire with it. Like, they were showing several different mechanics with it. So, what do you guys think about Overwatch on Switch? Let's just start there.
I love the idea. I want Overwatch everywhere. I'm really sorry that my family will never see me again once this game's on the Switch. But in all reality, I probably won't buy it unless they implement some cross progression. Just I'm not big on grinding the same game on another platform except for Skyrim, so I got to have the cross progression before I buy in.
See, my thing with Overwatch is, number one, I just want it everywhere. But number two, like, the progression to me doesn't really matter because the skins don't matter to me at all. So, like, to me, there's no real grind except just to get to 30 in order to play competitive. But I'm not going to be playing this game with the goal of, like, getting hardcore into the competitive side of it. Mm-hmm. It's more to just play it while my wife's watching something on TV.
That's true. That makes sense. I was thinking more in terms of, like, there are a lot of skins in that game that I've worked really, like, I went out of my way to try and get, and I don't want to do that again. Mm-hmm. But I also wouldn't want to tank my competitive rating by playing on Switch, so maybe it's not a bad thing after all.
That was the other thing I thought about, was like, oh, I just don't know how, like, well my skills are going to translate. Which, from other games that I've played on multiple platforms, Switch being one of them, I tend to be better competitively online on Switch. Like, I think about Fortnite. I'm way worse on Fortnite at Xbox than I am on Switch. So maybe it'll be like that with Overwatch as well. All right. We also got a brief look. Let me mention this real quick. Last night on the PvA Nightly Rundown, 9 o'clock Eastern on twitch.tv/PvA Radio, I drew a masterpiece, and not to exaggerate in any way, shape, or form, but a masterpiece of a whiteboard drawing about the cycle that Nintendo fans go through whenever a Direct is teased and then announced and then happens and then the fallout from it. I was totally off on my prediction for what I thought this was going to be. I thought we were going to get like a Smash Brothers level deep dive into the individual mechanics of Luigi's Mansion and of Pokemon, but Nintendo did not really linger on anything here. Like, I don't think they spent more than 3 minutes talking about any one of these announcements, which is not very Nintendo of them. It moved more like an Xbox presentation than a Nintendo presentation.
Well, the Smash Brothers reel just finished about 3 days ago, so that team is just now able to start their next.
And they were like, reel, "Oh shit, we got a lot of announcements to get." They've all backed up on us.
Shotgun approach.
So yeah, they showed some new worlds, a pirate world, a disco world, 2 to 8 player local multiplayer mode where you just try to suck up a bunch of ghosts, which is
for
cool.
Luigi's Mansion.
Yeah, for Luigi's Mansion. My wife was very excited about this free to start Kirby game, Super Kirby Clash, which kind of looked like a Smash Brothers version, like game where instead of fighting each other, you just fight this giant ass monster that gets dropped in, and everybody's Kirby. So she was excited about that. It didn't particularly move the needle for me. And I'm just gonna hit everything high level, and you stop me whenever I get to something that you guys want to talk about. Trials of Mana remake is coming April 24th, 2020. Return of Obra Dinn. Obra Dinn is coming this fall. Cody, you're a fan of that game?
Yeah, and I never finished it on PC, mostly just because I don't play games on my laptop very often. But that's a game I'll definitely rebuy on Switch to actually finish, because it seems like a perfect Switch game.
Next they showed Little Town Hero, which is a title from Game Freak. Has very, very Pokemon vibes, as you can imagine, within it. But rather than playing with a bunch of different characters, you're playing with as one character. They announced that Toby Fox is the composer on the game, who is the same person who wrote the music for Undertale, which is one of the most praised soundtracks in recent memory, at least for me. They also announced that Banjo-Kazooie is coming to Smash today. You can download him now. And then they announced their next character. And I don't know if this is like common for Smash announcements, but it was this envelope with a red stamp, which I think is kind of standard that goes flying around. But it said, "You are cordially invited to Smash."
So gentlemanly.
Which I can imagine just Tinder profiles being updated left and right now.
That got pitched somewhere.
Yeah.
And multiple people said
May have been lost in translation.
Well, that's because they don't have the, resident middle schooler that sits in on these boards to let them know.
Just let me smash.
The character that they announced, so they went back to the Neo Geo, they went to Fatal Fury, and they flew around to all of these characters who I don't know or give a shit about, and then they finally revealed that Terry is going to be the next fighter in Smash Ultimate. I'm going to be honest, guys. I don't know who the fuck Terry is. Do you guys?
I don't either.
Nope. I'd like to see Terry Crews in there. That would be cool.
That'd be way cooler. That'd have been way more hype. Or Dave Bautista.
Barista.
Dave Barista. He'll be coming in November of 2019, but they also announced that so the fighter pack got you 5 fighters. Terry's going to be the 4th, so they said, we got one more fighter, but we also want to let you know that more DLC fighters are coming to Smash as well, which you would expect.
I'm not going to do my rant about Smash characters again, but I'm just linked to whatever episode that discussion was.
Yeah, we talked about that on the Nightly Rundown.
Yeah.
They also announced the Legend of Zelda. Didn't announce, but they showed more of Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening. There's something called Chamber Dungeon, where after you finish dungeons, you get pieces of that dungeon, and then you can build out custom dungeons that you can play through.
Like a Mario Maker for Zelda.
Yeah. So, not nearly as robust by any stretch of the imagination, but same concept. Dragon Quest XI S with some long-ass subtitle that I didn't get to record is coming on September 27th with a free demo that's out now. They showed a 2-long trailer for Tokyo Mirage Sessions FE Encore that gave me flashbacks to my days at GameStop, because that game came out on DS when I was there. So Tokyo Mirage Sessions is Shin Megami Tensei and what's the other one that just came out? The RPG. I'm
Persona?
Blanking. No, not Persona. 3 Houses.
Oh, Fire Emblem.
Fire Emblem. Yeah, Fire Emblem and Shin Megami Tensei. It's a smash up between those. Then they announced Deadly Premonition 2, A Blessing in Disguise, coming in 2020, and then a remake of not a remake, but like they're calling it Deadly Premonition Origins. So the first one launched today on Switch, and I know like a lot of people are excited about that game. And the trailer to me looked dope as hell. I may have to go back and try that out.
Those games are wacky.
Let's see. They announced that the Divinity Original Sin 2 Definitive Edition is available today. So, Cody, you can restart your playthrough on that.
I can restart and rebuy this game on a platform I probably would have originally bought it on.
Then the Doom 64 is coming to Switch on November 22nd. November 22nd. Pete Hines made an appearance.
Oh, nice.
To announce it. This is the first time Doom 64 is going to be available on anything other than the Nintendo 64, I believe, is what they said. Another
little Bethesda handshake there.
They love it, man. They love it.
They do.
A new game from Hi-Res Studios, which is the people who made Smite, I believe. Is it Smite or did they make Paladins? Hold on. Hi-Res Games. I want to make sure I get this right. I'm sorry. They made Smite and Paladins.
Oh, wow.
And Realm Royale. They announced a new game, which is called Rogue Company, which seemed to be kind of like an Overwatch style hero-based objective shooter. But I don't think they gave a window for a release on that, but it looked pretty cool. Then they announced 4 new features for Pokemon, guys. You ready for this? None of us are really big Pokemon fans, right?
Nah.
So forgive us. Cody, are you?
I find it entertaining. I haven't played in a while, though.
Okay. So forgive me if I'm missing something here. The first thing is that you're going to be able to customize your character, which is pretty cool. But they made a really big deal out of the fact that you're going to be able to put on outerwear and gloves. They were like, it's not just shirts and pants, guys. It's outerwear and gloves. It's like, all right. Weird flex, but okay. The next is Pokemon camps. So you will have a camp where outside of the village you can go and like all of your Pokemon are free and can walk around and you can like play with them, and people can visit your camp with their Pokemon, up to 4 people. And if you're visiting somebody's Pokemon, you can bring one of your Pokemon to play with the other Pokemon. But I didn't see them talk about what the benefit of that is gameplay wise, or if it's just a way to like take cute photo mode pictures of your Pokemon playing together.
I wonder
some stat benefit.
I wonder if there's a monetization plan there, because when I hear Pokemon camps, like it just makes me think of the Animal Crossing camp thing. But maybe I'm making assumptions where I shouldn't.
I mean, if any franchise is primed for monetization, it is Pokemon.
That's true. I think that I think they just called it Pokemon Camp because there's literally tents. So when the camps didn't seem to be customizable in any way outside of just the Pokemon running around. Then they were.
This is what I'm looking forward to.
Okay, well, the first 3 words I have with the punctuation at the end is the exact way that they announced it. Curry on rice. With a question mark. And that's how everybody watching, I assume, read it as well and thought, what the fuck? So in a very Zelda-like fashion, you will be able to gather ingredients in the world and build over 100 types of curry. And your goal is to complete the curry dex, which is your Pokedex of curries. So over 100 combinations. And there is a mini game when making the curry where you have to put a little love into it, a little heart. So it was this heart that had this like circle that was expanding and contracting around it, and you had to like time it right. And if you timed it right, you would put in just the right amount of love into your curry.
This is such a Nintendo thing to do.
So Lauren watched this with me. She was like, what are they talking about?
A curry dex. I love it.
Over 100 types of curry. So I've had Japanese curry. I've had Indian curry. What are the other 98? Do you have spaghetti and call it Italian curry?
This is a completely different world. They could have all kinds of curry.
Jason Schreier tweeted a picture of a Pokemon and then of one of the kinds of curry, just meaning that what if we have to kill the Pokemon in order to
You may
make
have to.
What's
You
more
give me a
important?
Pokemon RPG, or I can play the local butcher, where I just like prepare the meats for everybody. I'm in.
You got too many Ratatats. You got to clear them out somehow.
Of all the Pokemon you could have chosen to eat, you picked the Rattata. just a poached Togepi. Like, here we
There
go.
you go.
They announced
I kind of dig this, by the way.
the curry thing.
The curry dex is hilarious to me and maybe worth the price of admission alone.
Is it possible for me to do the Curry Dex completely without training any Pokemon?
Yeah, that's actually a good point. Can you just
If there
play
are
this
people
game as a
just
curry
exclusive-
simulator?
Oh gosh, we got to find the people that are playing it like that and write an article about them.
The people are going to be me.
Like me. We sent a fucking professional photo crew out to Cody's house to do this like 5-page spread. We have a player versus all printed magazine with Cody as the feature.
The cover story.
Meet the man
Dex.
with the complete curry dex and 0 Pokemon in his Pokedex. Oh man. And then the fourth thing that they announced were 2 new Pokemon, Poltegeist. No, hold on. My screen is very low res here.
Poultrygeist? Is it Poultrygeist?
No, it's not Poltegeist.
Damn it.
It's Polte. it is Poltegeist, and it is a teapot, which I don't know why. I guess I can see why they didn't call it Pottygeist, because that would attract a whole different kind of individual. There's already weird sexualization of Pokemon already.
is.
We don't. Yeah, yeah. Anyway, we don't.
Rule 34.
We don't need that with this teapot. So yeah, Poltegeist is a teapot, and then they have Cramorant or Cramorant, I can't remember, who's just a bird.
Okay.
He's just a bird, and he controls water.
They're definitely not running out of ideas.
Yeah. So
They
that-
need to bring me on board. I'll give them some Pokemon ideas.
And look, I'm sure that a lot of Pokemon fans are really excited about this stuff, and Cody is here really jazzed about the Curry Dex, but it just didn't do it for me. It didn't do it for
If
me
you're
at all.
on board, you're on board at this point.
Yeah,
I don't think it's going to change anything.
I mean, if you can do the curry thing and not the Pokemon, I might look into it. I might join you, Cody.
True. Join Team Curry.
Let's see. Then they had the they revealed that SNES games are coming to the Switch, and that is launching tomorrow. So if you're a Switch Online subscriber, you're going to get 20 SNES games tomorrow. And you can look up the list of all the games that are included on that. So on top of the NES games that you already get, 20 more SNES games are coming. And they're also putting out a wireless SNES controller for $30 exclusive to Nintendo Switch Online subscribers. So that was pretty cool.
I wonder if you can use that for non-SNES games. Like, I'd love to play Marvel Ultimate Alliance with an old school controller.
Probably not. I don't think you can use the because they did this with the NES controller as well, and I don't think you can use it on other games. Then they announced Mario and Sonic Olympic Games Tokyo 2020 edition coming on November 5th. There's a story mode this year where you must witness all of the debauchery of the Olympic Village as Sonic the Hedgehog. Mario, no! Then they have Daemon X Machina, a demo coming out today. I believe that game comes out next week. And then Star Wars Jedi Knight 2 Jedi Outcast is coming September 24th. And then I think I saw a Star Wars article that said this is actually going to be Jedi Outcast and Jedi Academy?
Yes.
Go ahead, Larry. I
Those
yield
two
the
games.
floor.
2 of the finest games ever made, let alone Star Wars games.
Wow.
I mean, I've ranted about Jedi Academy more times than I can count over our years of games podcasting. I love that game. And if you like Star Wars at all or RPGs at all, like pick that up for sure. I have a lot less experience with Outcast. Unfortunately, as a child, I rented that a couple times, but I didn't get to play all the way through it. But I've heard wonderful things about it as well. So I'm really excited about this.
All right. Then I can't remember what the package is called, but Assassin's Creed Rogue and Black Flag are going to be packaged together, coming in December. I don't know if they announced a price for that either, but yeah. So Rogue and Black Flag, which Black Flag is
one of the better entries.
Yeah, one of the better entries. Rogue was the one that was like exclusive to PS3 and 360, then later came to.
Yeah. But it supposedly offers one of the more interesting takes on the Assassin's Creed narrative. You play as a Templar.
Yeah.
It kind of offers the other side. People have always spoken. I think Assassin's Creed diehards have always spoken about that game in glowing terms. But it's cool that they're bringing more of these massive open world games to Switch between this and The Witcher. It's definitely, it'll be great to see the first one that kind of launches with it, but it's cool. I mean, maybe they'll end up porting the other Assassin's Creed games over as well, which would be awesome to see.
I'm glad you said The Witcher, because they did announce something about The Witcher that didn't make its way into that didn't make its way into this list. They just showed more about it, because we already know when that game's coming out, right?
Yeah, they announced that relatively recently.
Okay. So yeah, they went into a sizzle reel after that where they announced Dauntless is coming to Switch, which is the like Monster Hunter, Epic's Monster Hunter world. The Fortnite style Monster Hunter world game. Just Dance 2020, Grid Auto Sports, Farming Simulator 20, seeing that Nintendo is taking the esports scene very seriously. Ni no Kuni, Wrath of the White Witch is coming. NBA 2K20, Call of Cthulhu, The Outer Worlds, which, did we know that was coming to Switch already? Had that been confirmed?
They said it was. They just hadn't announced a date.
Okay. Devil May Cry 2 and Vampire were all announced. Were all shown during that sizzle reel. Then they talked about Animal Crossing, and I'm going to be honest, guys. If Pokemon is a game I could care less about, the game I could care less about is Animal Crossing. I don't give a rip about this game.
I can't wait to play a proper Animal Crossing game. Animal Crossing Pocket Camp didn't do it for me. Too much of the mobile games. Sign in, get your rewards. Be sure to do all these tasks. I don't want a job. I want a game where I can relax and make some animals mad at my complete neglect of their neighborhood.
A malevolent overlord, I see. So yeah, they just went on a little deep dive about Animal Crossing, and then they ended the show with Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition coming in 2020. So I'm going to be honest, guys, I was not expecting this volume of announcements out of Nintendo. I don't think neither of you guys had the chance to actually watch it, but going through just what I ran down here, what are your reactions overall?
I too was shocked by the volume. When you put Nintendo Direct in there, I expected to see 2 or 3 things worth talking about, and really it's quite a bit of content, and it may not all be stuff that I'm interested in, but it does present a broad catalog, a great diversity of games to play on that platform. So I think the future of Switch is looking awesome.
Yeah, I think they're continuing to kind of kill it just on ports. They're leveraging what people love about the Switch and just expanding the catalog. Like you said, I think the best. I think it's better that they didn't end up diving into anything or dwelling on anything too long. The scattershot approach seems good, just based purely on the sheer diversity of stuff they have here. I think there's a little bit of everything for everyone here, like between Assassin's Creed, indies like Obra Dinn, their exclusives, Pokemon, Luigi, Animal Crossing. It just seems like there's a little bit of something for everyone here. And yeah, I think capitalizing on newer stuff like the Outer Worlds is also great. We knew that was coming, but seeing a little bit more of that is not a bad thing. And just I'm also pleased by the amount of RPGs they have here. because it sometimes feels like there aren't too many like proper RPGs being put on consoles anymore. And I guess if so many are being ported to Switch, I don't see why that people would end up putting them on any other console.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there was a little bit of everything here, which is not normally the case for Nintendo.
No.
I normally go into these things and I'm like, okay, well, I can just kind of have this on in the background because they're going to stay here for 10 minutes and then move here for another 7. And it's just going to be a bunch of games I don't care about. So it was cool to see this like really engaging, fast paced. Like, we're not going to have people just talking about little small mechanics that are going to be available in the games. I think that's good. And I'm hoping that what we're seeing is Nintendo recognizing that they have this unique advantage of being able to say like, hey, we're putting old ass games on this thing and people are still going to get excited about it.
Yep.
And because of that, they can take the volume shooter approach, right? Like, we're going to put up 30 announcements in this 40-minute presentation and realize that, hey, not all 30 are going to connect with everybody, but there's at least going to be 5. I'm sure if we went down through this list, each of us could point at 5 things that we're like, oh, I'm pretty excited about that. And Overwatch counts as all 5 for me. It made the 40 minutes all worth it, and it happened in the first 2 minutes.
I think the Star Wars games in particular are brilliant get for them as far as like bringing old games over, because there's such a lack of Star Wars video game content right now. And Jedi Academy is, in a lot of ways, it's the precursor to the Force Unleashed. You're making the choices of what kind of character you're going to be. You're leveling up the Force skills that you choose. You get to select what kind of outfit you've got. You design your own lightsaber, all that stuff. You master different forms of combat. That's just a great grab in this particular.
Mm-hmm. It was funny when the trailer first started. I was like, "Is Fallen Order about to be on this thing?" And I was like, "Oh no, this doesn't look nearly as good." And then it all made sense.
My favorite thing about that game, guilty pleasure, you can level up Force Choke in it and just ragdoll enemies across the map, through windows, off of ledges.
I think the kids are referring to that as yeeting now. You can yeet them. Level up your Force
Choke to yeet them.
They should have put that in the trailer. All right, guys. Any other parting thoughts on the Nintendo Direct from today?
Where's
Curry.
Nintendogs?
Tons of DS announcements here, guys. Get excited. Go out and buy your 3DSs. Plenty. Bowser promises they're not done with it quite yet. All right, guys. Well, let's move on. Cody, what is your topic for us today?
Yeah, I look for any opportunity to talk about Cyberpunk 2077, but it just so happens that there's an actual legitimate reason to talk about it this week, because CD Projekt Red released a deep dive, about a 15 minute deep dive that is a highly edited version of what they showed behind closed doors at E3 this year. And so they detailed a number of things and revealed a number of things, some of which we had a kind of a vague idea about. And essentially what was in the deep dive was they highlighted the different ways you can play, the diversity of play styles that you can kind of take with your character V, whether you're going all guns blazing, sneaking around, hacking enemies. They detailed a little bit more about how hacking works, how essentially you have in standard fantasy RPG terms, you have a spell book, and within that you have various programs that you can use. You can only ever have a certain amount of programs that you use, so you can never hack every part of a system at a time. And when you hack a system, you can gain access to cameras, you can gain access to enemy comms, a variety of different things. They showed a little bit of how the hacking minigame works, and how varied it is. They also detailed a little bit, they've kind of talked about character customization, choosing backgrounds, and how that impacts the way you play. They delved a lot more, I guess, into the lore of the specific neighborhood they were detailing, which is Pacifica. Very intriguing stuff about how basically it was an area that was supposed to be high on development, at a bunch of high class developers pouring money into it to build hotels, and then everybody pulled out at the last second. It's become kind of run down and is now kind of basically a slum, as it's largely inhabited by a lot of Haitian immigrants who immigrated to the U.S. after the island was essentially flooded due to massive storms. So there's obviously an environmental message and environmental aspect to this world, which is obviously intriguing. But a lot of it was kind of a deep dive into what we had only heard about from games press after E3. And then along with this, they also released a few subsequent tweets that kind of revealed other things about Cyberpunk 2077, including the fact, and this was apparently controversial among many people, including the fact that it is almost entirely in first person, including in cutscenes. We had known the game was first person, but I think people assumed, based on footage that had been released prior, that cutscenes would be in third person, so you could see your character. But CD Projekt Red is going all in on first person, apparently, except for select scenes. And I saw someone who was writing about this on Twitter saying, I can guess what those third person scenes will be. Hint, hint, most likely sex scenes. And then the other confirmation that came through a CD Projekt Red tweet was that multiplayer is officially in the works. We had heard hints about this, whether or not they were kind of beta testing, or not even beta testing, they were kind of R&Ding it. And so they've confirmed that they will be working on a multiplayer component for Cyberpunk that will be released way after the single player releases in April, which I can't even believe that this game is coming out in April, but that is the case. So quite a lot of details, some of which we've kind of heard about, some of which we've seen before, but in less detail. I think we've sort of established our thoughts on this game, but overall, does this change your opinion of the game? Is it kind of concretizing your opinions of the game as it stands? I think this only made me. I think at this point, I'm just kind of done seeing stuff from this game, despite the fact that we've really only seen one in-depth gameplay trailer. I'm just ready to kind of put the controller in my hands, because I think that's the best way to experience this. But obviously, this stuff is very exciting to me. I like seeing how the game will play, even though I'm not 100% certain on the actual gameplay loop. But what were your impressions of seeing all this stuff?
It didn't. I'm in the same boat, basically. It didn't change anything for me. I know I'm interested in the game, and I already knew that. This didn't change my mind on that point. And I know some people had issue with the first person decision, but for me, like, that doesn't make any difference. So yeah.
I mean, I didn't watch this trailer before the show, and that is because whenever I decide I'm in on a game, I just like stop taking in stuff about it.
Media blackout.
Yeah, like I want to experience this stuff for the first time when I'm playing it, and so I'm sold on this game and I'm interested in playing it. I am a little bit. I'm not like upset by it being first person. I'm a little bummed, especially given how much they've emphasized the character creation and all that kind of stuff. Character creation just doesn't make a lot of sense to me when it's like, hey. Because what they said is you'll be able to see it in select cutscenes, in loading screens, and in mirrors in the world. So like if you walk past the mirror, you'll be able to see your character. And so I'm like, why have a lot of character customization if you're not going to be able to see your character for 95% of this experience?
Yeah, that is something I guess I want to touch on, because it kind of made me think about like what immersion means to us. Because I think there's an argument to be made. They're going full first person because they will immerse you more in the world. That was the entire intention behind the decision. But I think another component of immersion is being able to feel like you've created a character that is your own. And a large part of that, especially in RPGs, is customization, not only in terms of stats, but aesthetics. And in a game where one of your 5 core stats is cool, I think it would be kind of cool to be able to see your character in more than just a customization menu. I'm actually also not really upset about this because I think ultimately I like the idea that you're going to be in first person just because it'll make me feel more connected to the world and it'll make me feel more grounded. I would like to see my character pop up occasionally in cutscenes, but I'm all right experiencing it from just like inside the character's head. I think that'll provide some interesting opportunities for kind of immersive storytelling. That was one of my, actually, I really like that about, I think it's odd about Deus Ex to people that you play for the most part in first person, then you switch to third person and when you go into cover and during cutscenes. I would have preferred just to stay in first person for that stuff. But it does kind of like, I think both ways of looking at it are different ways of looking at immersion. And I guess some people are divided on how they see it, but I guess I favor the way that CD Projekt Red has decided to design this game.
Well, I talked about this last night on the rundown, and I was like, I thought we were done with the word immersion when talking about video games. Like,
nope.
Immersion was such a buzzword, you know, like in the PS3 360 era, especially when we were starting to get into like more cinematics and like inching closer to, you know, photorealism in gaming. Like immersion was the buzzword of all marketing copy for games in that era, and I thought we had moved away from that. And to see it pop up in this context was strange to me, to say that like first person is going to allow you to be more immersed in that world. And to me, it's just like, well, then what was The Witcher? Like if immersion in this game is, if you're best served by putting it in first person in order to keep players immersed, like why was that same sentiment not true for The Witcher? Is it because of the location? Is it because of the story? Is it because, you know, it is this kind of like larger than life setting that you're in? So that was strange to me. And what I ended up kind of positing last night was more of because what I thought was that there were going to be actual segments of the game you could play in third person. It sounds like I was mistaken on that. So
except when you're in vehicles.
Okay.
And it zooms out to behind the back.
Okay. So what I ended up landing on was like immersion probably in this instance just means like it was easier for us technically to just keep this all in first person rather than try to render out every cutscene in third person as well. But that may not hold up given
I
that.
I don't know if I think there's an inherent difference in the way they're telling the story here. Geralt is a character. Like he's an established character. And so it only makes sense. Like you're not really, I mean, you do to a certain extent craft the Geralt that you want through how you react to things, but he is ultimately an established character. And so it makes more sense to view it from without him, from outside of him. I think here, because V is very much a thing of your creation, it makes perhaps more sense for it to be first person because it is you. It's not Geralt. So that's kind of why I see they made the decision. I also think they wanted to they're kind of flexing here, and they wanted to make it more kind of cinematic, and it's a lot easier to do that when you're in first person. You can put your gun away and you can just experience the world without your character running around in the background.
So I'm in the camp of I person more immersive. I react to things a lot differently than I do in third person. I think about going through a zombie game like Left 4 Dead versus playing a Resident Evil game. Like it just hits me different when there are like parts of my vision that I can't see until I turn my head and look at them. And I know you still have to turn in third person, but it's not quite the same effect. So I find it more immersive in that sense. But I also understand the people who are frustrated by not getting to see all this stuff they've spent the time customizing, and that's a different type of immersion that they're losing out on. But I also wonder if there's a practical purpose behind this in terms of how some of this hacking and stuff works. I wonder if some of it's going to be able to be overlaid on you on your vision while you're looking around doing other things. And maybe there wasn't a good way to make that look good in third person.
Yeah, maybe. Regardless, I think it's it'll be kind of interesting when the game comes out how many people how quickly this conversation goes away. Because I think people will just be playing the game for what it is, and it is a first-person shooter, and so I think it can be a little bit disorienting to be switching perspectives or on some level. But I guess the main thing I wanted to talk about here was how Cyberpunk has been presented to us so far, because it has been an interesting mix of word of mouth spreading from E3, us seeing that footage months later, edited or otherwise, and I guess whether or not what we're seeing is capable of representing what this game is. I think we talked about this a little bit, Luke, during our E3 conversation about Cyberpunk, but like, how much can you show people about this game without just forking over the controller to them? Because I think this game isn't one that is best represented in like 15-minute chunks.
Mm-hmm.
If The Witcher is anything to go by, that's a game that rewards that you can really only get a sense of after spending time in a side quest, which is often more than 15 minutes. It could be hours long, or time in a main story quest, which is even longer. And so I'm sort of, I think my curiosity about this stems from the fact that I still don't get a sense of what the moment-to-moment gameplay of this game is, and maybe it's literally just The Witcher in a cyberpunk world. But part of me wonders whether they've been illustrating mechanics, but largely skating by on vibe. I don't know if I'll even get a sense of what this game is until I play it, and that's in a different sense than Death Stranding, where I literally don't understand what the game is. I understand what this game is fundamentally. I just don't understand how it plays on a moment-to-moment basis, I guess. And so I'm wondering, how do you feel about the way this game has been presented, and how do you feel you understand it based on how it's been presented?
I have appreciated the lack of information about this game. Although we have been aware that it's been coming for a long time, it wasn't like we saw like an in-depth look and then had to wait for several years. I think that that's just really smart, given the way some games have gone this generation with big claims that they didn't live up to. So on that front, like, I like how it's slowly been building up, and now we've gotten a lot, but you're right that it's not it's hard to give a little glimpse of something like this and encapsulate it fully. But it's such a story-driven game, and I feel like what I've been shown is what a good movie trailer should be. Like, it gives me the vibe without giving the story away. And so I'm actually a fan of the fact that there's a lot of mystery still here.
Mm-hmm. I think I'm a little odd in the way that I like to take in not just Cyberpunk, but game announcements in general. Like, long segments of gameplay don't speak to me. Because at the end of the day, like, okay, I may notice a mechanic or two that's a little different, that looks cool, or I can see that it's smooth, or it looks like it plays and feels heavy. But at the end of the day, it's just like, you can't tell if gameplay is going to be fun until you get the controller in your hands and actually play it. And so I don't necessarily mind when any game is a little cagey with gameplay, in the sense of, like, I'm not looking for any kind of fulfillment in seeing gameplay footage. I do get a little concerned when everything seems to be so curated that I'm like, how far along are they with this shit? You know, like, that's where I start to get concerned. Long gameplay footage more so shows me that, like, there are ideas here that are being executed on, and that we're further down the road than maybe I would think. Like, and for a game that's coming out in April, which is insane, I just feel like we haven't seen the stuff that makes me feel confident that the game is coming out in April. You know, like, this is all footage that you said was from the E3 behind closed door thing, right? Like,
from that segment of the game, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's strange that they're doing it this way, but I do think that this game is going to get by a lot on the vibe and the world, and I think that's why they're leaning into it so much, is people want to play in this cool ass cyberpunk, like look at these technologically modified human beings, like this is a cool world to live to be in. And so I'm okay with that. I'm just more concerned from a roadmap standpoint of what we've been seeing and when we're expected to actually have this game in our hand.
Yeah, and I guess I do want to clarify that I do kind of respect the way they've rolled out information about this game. They're like, let's spread this, let's show people this behind closed doors, get that excitement tingling in the atmosphere, release that a month or two later so people can see it, so everybody's aware of what this is. Let's just stay silent for another year, wait until E3, drop the Keanu bomb, then show people a little bit more, let that excitement tingle again, and then release something like this, which is, as you said, Luke, very highly curated. Like, it's 15 minutes of 2 playthroughs, and the 2 playthroughs compose about a 5-minute chunk of the last section of this 15-minute demo. But I also sort of admire it because I think, based on the 30-minute chunk and based on what they've shown us, I do get a sense for how the game plays. And they've teased the world enough, especially in this, kind of outlining the lore in like a lore-heavy chunk, that I'm interested in the world, but they've avoided almost entirely what the story is about somehow. Like, we have the basic arc that you're a street tough, you're like a street tough dude or woman kind of working your way up the ranks of Night City. Beyond that, I am unsure of the general story of this game, and I think they've done that on purpose. They said specifically it's heavily edited to avoid spoilers, and they've only really hinted at what Keanu Reeves even is, like, as a construct in this world. So like you said, Larry, I actually really like that there's still a hefty dose of mystery around what this game is about. The vibe keeps me engaged, and I feel like I get a sense of how it plays, but I'm also, I was just reflecting on how little I know about this game. And I think it's interesting for something that I'm so heavily anticipating, that's due out in less than a year, to not really know too much about either the story or moment-to-moment gameplay, and whether that's up to how they can present this or how they choose to present this, I'm still a little unclear on. But
I think that the stage announcement stuff is less to do with CD Projekt Red and more to do with just like the way E3 has been going over the last couple of years, like, where I imagine that Xbox has quite a bit of say in what CD Projekt Red can bring, and I imagine they probably said, like, look, we're not looking for an extended gameplay demo, like, we want the moment. And the Keanu Reeves thing was a moment that we're still talking about now, whereas we wouldn't be talking about, like, oh man, do you remember when they revealed this one hacking mechanic in the middle of that E3 presentation?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, they've done it both years. That first trailer, just the way it happened at the end of the presentation with the computer crashing and the screen coming down and all that, it was a moment. I think they've capitalized on E3 as well as they can, both on the stage and behind closed doors. Again, I'm just intrigued by the mystery that still surrounds this game somehow. Like, it's one of the most anticipated games, and it's one of the most covered games, and we know a lot about it, but at the same time, we still know very little. Unlike Death Stranding, where we know a whole lot.
But still,
really, what does that
anything.
even mean?
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on. Larry, what is your topic?
All right. So my topic is from an article from called Chucklefish Responds to Allegations It Exploited Starbound Volunteers. And long story short, Chucklefish had a program set up where these teenage volunteers could come in and just get some experience at a game studio, and they wound up producing a good bit of content that was used in a game that wound up making Chucklefish a lot of money, and those volunteers were never compensated. And we could get more in detail about that, but it's just kind of the standard operating procedure of the current cultural moment we find ourselves in, of companies using volunteer labor and not paying that volunteer labor and making money off of their efforts. So I know that was a very brief summary. Do you feel like I've left out anything important? That's essentially the story. These teenagers are now adults, and they're speaking out about what happened to them, and in their naivety, they allowed themselves to be taken advantage of, and now they are not pleased that happened. But this story stood out to me because of the discussion that you had, Luke, several weeks ago with Andrew on the show. And our different generation. I'm like 45, and Andrew's like 16. But just kidding. I hope you heard that, Andrew. Yeah, just this is kind of the way things are. And what are your initial reactions to this?
Yeah.
And given the perspectives of some of the young whippersnappers, do you think that this is actually defensible in any way? Was Chucklefish completely in the wrong to do this?
I used the same phrase last week in talking about a totally different situation with the sexual assault allegations that were taking place last week. But I said it is shocking, but I am not shocked. So there's something jarring about seeing somebody go on Twitter and say, I gave hundreds of hours of my life, not to get coffee for the developers, not to set up the conference room, not to, work the front desk or anything like that, but to develop significant chunks of this game for these people and was not paid a dime for it. Like, when I think about free labor to get your foot in the door of somewhere, I think about like internships, and we can argue the validity of internships. But when you're doing internships, generally there is an educational aspect to it, and you are not expected to do the exact work of the people who you are interning under. Like, you may be given responsibilities within it, but you're never like just given like, hey, here's this thing, take it and run with it, like this is now yours kind of deal. And so the work that was being asked for was not volunteer internship level work. The work that was being asked here was seemingly employee level, like, you should be compensated for this kind of stuff.
And I don't know the situation years ago when this happened, but I know that today in most states there are actually laws that prohibit unpaid internships from including work that would normally be accomplished by an employee. So if you're currently in an internship where that's happening, you should consult your local laws and perhaps a lawyer.
Yeah, I guess my initial reaction was somewhat similar to Luke's. This seems to fall in line with what we've heard at other studios. The passionate workers whose passion is getting taken advantage of in an industry that seems to use passion and kind of use it to manipulate people and get them to do work way beyond their capacity. I do think, and maybe before we dive deeper into the story, you can read the statement from the developer, because I think the statement from the developer is quite interesting, based on how they're choosing to defend themselves in this case.
Yeah. Let's see. So here's a little bit of the statement. We're aware and saddened by the current allegations against Chucklefish regarding Starbound's early development. During this time, both the core crew and community contributors were collaborating via a chat room and dedicating their time for free. Community contributors were under no obligation to create content, work to deadlines, or put in any particular number of hours. Everyone was credited or remunerated as per their agreement. It's been almost a decade since Starbound's development first began, and from then Chucklefish has grown considerably into an indie studio that has a strong emphasis on good working practices, providing a welcoming environment for all employees and freelancers. Our doors remain open to any related parties who wish to discuss their concerns with us directly, end quote. And just since they referenced it, I didn't start early enough in the statement. The agreement that they're referring to is that all of these volunteers signed an agreement and signed away any rights to make money off of their work.
One thing I would be interested in this, and I don't think this is discussed in this article or the Polygon article, but they were 16 when they entered this agreement, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Did a parent also sign off on these contracts that they were working under, or was this just something, because you can't, as a minor, you can't sign a legally binding document with an organization. You have to have a parent or guardian sign that document as well. So I'd be interested to see that, like, because I think it's a little hard to say a 16-year-old signed their right to compensation away.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much of this stuff that, because of the small startup nature of a lot of things in this industry, just go completely unregulated. And unfortunately, it often results in stuff like this, where like it's a lot of inexperienced people, or a lot of people who want to give other people experience, kind of interacting with each other, and results in a weird working environment where it's extremely informal and extremely casual to a fault. And I mean, this is a working environment. Work is being done, and a game is being created. There need to be, I mean, as much as you want to pretend like it's a laid back startup environment, there does need to be process and procedure for this stuff, and this is why.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and having, and Cody, you're fully aware of this too. Like, having worked in the games writing space, this stuff is widespread there as well.
Oh yeah, 100%.
And I've talked about this very candidly, both on this show and on the Nightly Rundown, of where I was on both sides of this. I worked a lot for free for organizations that did not compensate me for my work. And then we did Two Left Sticks, where I led the place. I wasn't making a dime off of it, but I had individuals working under me who were volunteering their time as well for that project. And, you know, I've talked at length about how I recognize now that was improper and incorrect of me to pull people in who were not involved, who were not actually like going to yield any additional benefit for like building it from the ground up with me. Like, they didn't own the thing alongside me, bringing those people in to work for free. But this is just a common tactic in the thing that is stated in the jobs like that I applied for and worked for free in the games writing space. And then it said, one of the graphic artist, Ro Watson, said it right here. He said, quote, "Put simply, it was either sign that contract and get your foot in the door or get out," end quote. And like, that's the rub. That's the carrot that they dangle in front of you. It's like, this is a way for you to break into the industry, and everybody at 16 is looking for a way to break into the industry for their dream job. And so, you know, throw caution to the wind, forget paying me. If this can get me a career in game development, I'm willing to jump at it. And we saw, I was one of those, you know, doe-eyed kids who jumped into roles into volunteer roles, thinking that, oh man, me writing for, you know, whatever fucking unknown website is my foot in the door to the industry. And it's just like, it was misrepresented and not really the case as to, like, yeah, you can build valuable experience there, but at the end of the day, nobody's going to look at it and be like, oh man, he wrote for this thing, or let's give him a job. Like, it's hardly a foot in the door in the industry in a lot of ways. This is maybe different, but we see this in game spaces all over the place. I brought up you know, I'm looking for esports jobs, and so I go to Hitmarker Jobs a lot. They have a lot of volunteer positions there. I pulled up one of the jobs that was listed on there. It was, no joke, a CFO position at a startup that required you to have an MBA and prior esports experience in order to. One of your responsibilities was to secure funds, and then the disclaimer at the bottom was recognize that this is a volunteer position until we are able to secure funds, at which point we will begin compensating you. And it's just like, that person people applying for that job have fucking MBAs, master's degrees. They've been in college for 6 years and have experience in the esports industry, and they're not going to get paid a dime to be the CFO, a C-suite executive of a startup company.
Where this differentiates a little bit from me, so, you know, the two left sticks endeavor, on this side of things, I think you're right, and I'm glad you've had the change of heart about how to approach these things. But we'd be having a very different conversation about two left sticks if it had like taken off and been really successful.
And I was I think, hoarding it and laying in it like a fucking dragon.
Right. And that's kind of how I feel about this situation. Like, okay, maybe Chucklefish like was just getting started and maybe they made some bad plays there at the beginning, but they wound up having a successful product. And I think the correct thing would have been to like go back and pay the people that made your product.
And I guess that is a little bit of a difference. In all of the job descriptions for people at Two Left Sticks, there was a compensation outline of like, when we start generating income, this is what you will make off of it. So there was a transparency that we're not here yet, but here's how you will begin to be compensated when we do get there, which was not the case here. So I agree with you, Larry.
Yeah, this is a lot more nefarious in my mind. So this stuff's everywhere, and it's terrible. You know, I work with youth, and I'm old enough now that I've had waves of kids move from teen years to adult years, and I've just kind of been watching from a distance as this becomes more prevalent. Like, and I don't know if we have the answer I don't have the answer to this question. Maybe you guys do. But how did we get to the point where free labor is such a common thing, where this is like something that happens so much and is permitted to happen?
Well, we grow up in this late capitalism dystopia where we're given dream jobs, and you grow up not dreaming about what you want to accomplish, but about what you want to spend your 9 to 5 doing. And so you like romanticize this industry and this job, and you say, I will do whatever it takes in order to get this job, and companies recognize that. And so, and it's kind of drilled in your head early on that like, oh, you got to make sacrifices and you're going to have to spend some time working for free. Like, I've talked to people who have said like, oh, I don't expect to get paid in my field for the first year and a half, 2 years that I'm out from college, because I'm going to have to just be gaining experience. And like, that is not something that you come to arrive at on your own. That is something that corporate America, culturally ingrained, like, well, and it's more nefarious than culture. It is what companies want you to believe, that you have to surrender that much time and energy and effort for this like abstract idea of experience.
Yeah, I think it's partly. Yeah, I think it's partly that. I think we've come to view labor as something not. I think in all aspects of life, we've been conditioned to think of labor as something that's not as valuable as it potentially could be, both for ourselves and for others. I think, I mean, just speaking from personal experience, I have spent 7 years in college, and I remember thinking, I'm going to get out of school with a master's degree and I'm going to work knowing I'm not going to earn a lot of money, gain experience so I can move to the next thing. There's just like, I mean, you could talk about the price of college, you could talk about the job market out there, how it's been kind of increased. First you needed a bachelor's degree to get a great job, now you need a master's degree to get a great job, now you need a PhD. It's a combination of a lot of things, and I think especially in an industry that's driven by passion, there's just a lot of desperation. Like you said, Luke, we're now thinking about what we want to do for our 9 to 5, not kind of what we want. We think of our job as life, and not what we want out of life writ large. And so the dream job is a manifestation of that. In some cases, to a good degree, because I think people are able to get a lot out of their job in a professional and personal way, but also to a detriment because it is literally your life.
Mhm.
That is what a dream job is. It is your employment becoming all consuming and becoming a part of your life. So I don't know. I think the answer to why we got here is manifold. It's probably too much to answer in an hour and a half podcast.
That's cute that you think this show's an hour and a half long anymore.
True. But I think it's a complicated question, but I think it's also one that we're all asking ourselves in some aspects of our life. I ask myself that. I'm going to be honest, I don't get paid a whole lot of my job. It stresses me out. I put in a lot and I don't get paid a lot. But I knew that going into it. And in some ways it is, I mean, I do know I need to do that to move on to the next thing. I'm gaining experience over this next year or so. And I just knew that I had to do that. I was trained that way in college. I was trained that way prior to college. It's been kind of the message that was imparted to me by corporations, by the culture at large, and has been ingrained in my body and in my mind. And I can look at that and I can think about that consciously, but ultimately it is, I think, especially in this industry that I'm in, it is, you got to get your toes wet somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What? You guys can rein me in if you think I'm going too far here, but I really feel like the free internship it's essentially a modern form of indentured servitude more often than not. I'm playing on your hopes that if you move here, you do the work first, and later down the road, you're gonna start getting what you deserve. And although I said earlier, a lot of state laws prohibit an intern from doing work that would normally be accomplished by an employee, I'm familiar with a lot of different internship situations in a lot of different industries, and almost all of them involve the interns doing work that would normally be accomplished by an employee. Like that's even if those laws are on the books, they're not getting enforced. These things aren't purely educational. And I think there are a lot of industries that are benefiting from a free labor force. And it's just wrong. If someone's going to work for you, they should be paid.
Mm-hmm.
Something that I really respected about, well, not at the time. For me, like, this issue wasn't on my radar as a college student. And that's just because I was oblivious to many things, but not that it wasn't an issue back then. But in retrospect, I really appreciate about the school that I went to. You had to find an internship that was paid. They expected that, and I took one that was not, but not because no one offered it to me. No one pursued me for that purpose. There was somebody that I really respected and wanted to learn from, and so I sought special permission from the school to intern under that guy while also working a job. But even in that situation, the church that I interned at wound up taking up a love offering, which is a fancy way of saying, "We'll pass a plate and everyone appreciates you. Here's some money," and it was significant. So essentially, my unpaid internship became pretty well paid. It didn't quite meet minimum wage for what I did, but it was paid. And I don't understand how people are making the ends meet. Well, I guess I do. They're essentially working multiple full-time jobs, and that can't be good for the internship actually accomplishing the purpose of them learning the things that they need to learn.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because I went to a school renowned for its co-op program, Northeastern. That's what it bills itself as. It essentially bills itself as, you go to school, you not only get to earn money during school because you're doing all these sweet paid internships that the school helps you find. Essentially, they have a network of employers they work with to get people hired in their given field. You come out with all this actual work experience that you're able to apply what you're learning in the classroom to that. Granted, not all of the positions are paid, but the majority of them are. But that's an anomaly for a lot of schools. And I think the collegiate system is also plays a large part in this, because oftentimes a lot of schools won't let you work a part-time or full-time job while you're doing an internship. There are actually restrictions against that. So you are actually paying a lot of money to do an unpaid internship.
Like teachers, when they do their student
yeah.
teaching, they're not allowed to take other jobs.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, my girlfriend was talking about this to me the other day, but and I think that breeds a sort of mentality about how much your labor is worth. I think a large problem in the games industry, both on the developer side and, as you were talking about, Luke, the writer side, is I don't think people understand how much their work is worth.
Yeah.
I would always encourage writers who are starting out to understand what your work is worth. And you might think that you don't really have that leverage or that power when you're starting out, but you do. You deserve to be paid for your work. If you're putting in the time and effort to make it something worthwhile. And I think the collegiate system to me kind of distorts that in a really disturbing way. Luckily, I went to a school where that wasn't the case, but I have heard plenty of horror stories about, like, I have to work this unpaid internship that is essentially a full-time job, and I can't work anywhere else to be able to pay the bills and pay my tuition or pay my college loans and I'm just essentially going into indentured servitude even further. You're just digging a hole for yourself.
Yeah. And as far as your work being worth something, at the end of the day, if somebody is making if somebody is making money off of your work, then you should be seeing a share of that.
Yes.
That's bottom line.
Especially in something this successful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And if you're not, someone is taking advantage of and Luke, so I've learned a lot of things vicariously through you and your career pursuits. But as a business owner, like when you started a business, like that was kind of different. The three of you had a share in that company.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you had employees on, like they had to get their checks regardless of how you guys were doing.
Yeah.
And so if someone is like growing their business off of your work, then there should be conversations about your share of things if this thing does take off. Just protect yourself. Don't let yourself be taken advantage of. But I don't know how realistic that is. Which transitions to the last thing I kind of want to bring up. What will it take to change this aspect of our culture? We can limit it to gaming if you want, but it's all over the place. Or is it even possible where we're at? Do you guys see any avenue for changing this situation?
I think there is kind of a light at the end of the tunnel. I mean, I think there are systemic things that are going to definitely need to be, need to be addressed. But I think there's two really interesting things happening in the startup career phase. The first is apprenticeship, and this is happening more in like labor industries and stuff like that are requiring specialized skills, but they're still more like traditional 9-to-5 jobs. But and it's sort of like the co-op program with Northeastern, where like, hey, we're partnering with employers who will pay, but in these apprenticeships, these employers are paying for you to go to school and paying you a salary to work at their factories or whatever in order to learn the skills they're creating their own workforce, with specialized skills for themselves. And they're paying the price for it. And I think that's really interesting. But that's more of a result of the fact that I think those positions are getting harder and harder to fill because more and more people are like, well, I want to move to New York and be on Broadway. But I think that is a cool thing that I'm hoping will have an effect in more areas than just kind of like the traditional 9-to-5 labor industries. But the second thing is just we live in a world today where it is more viable than ever to create something for yourself and actually make a living off of it. And I think about like not our generation and not even the generation after us, but the generation after them, like my 9-year-old nephew, and the internet literacy that these kids have and the ideas that even my 9-year-old nephew has of like what he would want to do on Twitch or what he would want to do on YouTube. And like, he's got creative ideas already thinking about those things. And the more he learns the skills to execute on them and develops the business acumen to like monetize it, like that generation is going to be very successful in creating because right now, like, hey, you get 500 people who really like your content on Twitch, you can figure out, you can be savvy enough to monetize that in a way to make it work for you. And so the more that like, we break the chains of our dependence on companies and corporations to employ us and give us a check, the better. And the more avenues we have to become creators of our own and build our own thing, I think it's going to impact changing those ways. And so, and I think that it'll also help people to recognize the value of their work when they're spending their young adult, their adolescent lives building something for themselves and seeing how much effort and energy it takes. They're going to place more value on the energy they're putting into things for a company as well.
Yeah, I think to the latter point, there's certainly some problematic elements that come from a largely self-employed workforce as well. I think there are benefits to working in a work environment that is somewhat structured and like has established rules and well, for lack of a better word, ethics.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just thinking of the stuff that happened recently with the Crime Junkies podcast, which like frustrated me to no end. Like that is a world that the podcast world is not unlike the streaming world, in that it's a lot of people just deciding to start something up, and the rules and regulations surrounding it are still, it's pretty much like the Wild West. So plagiarism is still relatively rampant when it comes to true crime stuff. But I think addressing the games industry, it's interesting because I think for all the talk about unionization and all the stories coming about crunches and labor abuses, contract work, which is ostensibly what this was, is not an issue that's really been tackled, and I think it's one that still a lot of companies fail to address adequately, and still take advantage of. I mean, that was part of the Rockstar story, the way they were treating their contractors. It was part of the Call of Duty story, I believe, as well. But I think the more this stuff is covered and the more it comes to light, and I think the more networks that are created as the industry grows, because I think there's definitely a strong contracting community within games. There is certainly something that I'm becoming more and more aware of. There's certainly a strong freelance community within games press. There's a really strong network of writers that kind of work together to educate each other. It's a community that's very supportive of one another, and that'll only become stronger as games press kind of becomes more recognized and more established. I guess I see less concrete change that has been made in the industry. And while I do have, I think you are right, Luke. I think there are coming waves in terms of how employment operates that I think will change things. I still have not seen much movement in the games industry on this front. As much as it's been covered, I still have not seen much improvement.
I'm curious about the future of education as far as how that plays into this as well, because that's a big problem. Is there these swelling education costs, and my education requires me to have an internship, but I'm not allowed to work, or I think, I don't see how the current cost of education is sustainable, and I think that's going to come to a head soon and affect all this in some way. But as far as making the change, I think you're right to highlight because if that issue doesn't start getting tackled with the same tenacity that these other labor issues are getting tackled with, it'll be really easy for companies to just shuffle the abuses into the contract work for the short term.
And in an industry that sees so much turnover as it is and is largely contractor driven, it's only more and more of a problem.
Mm-hmm. But I also just have faith that if we get people beginning to run their companies in ways that aren't abusive, I fully believe that those companies will find success in that. I think that human beings who are like happy and positive and satisfied and not overworked produce better products than those who are not. You know, maybe this is silly optimism, but you know, there are companies that are renowned for, and people want to be at those companies, and I just hope some of these other companies start like understanding that and maybe following that kind of example. Yeah. So, you know, there's probably not anyone listening to this podcast in that position, but on the off chance that there is, like, give it a shot.
Yeah. Well, and people more and more realize, leaders at these companies are more and more realizing, like, culture is more than just we have a ping pong table and a monthly company outing. You know, like, they're realizing that culture is about other things as well. And I mean, even the Chucklefish response, a part of it talked about, like, we've grown as a company in the last decade, and, you know, really focus on having a healthy workplace. Doesn't change the fact that they haven't righted their wrong, but you know, companies are becoming more and more aware of what it means to have good culture.
Yeah. Well, I guess I have one last question, and here's the cynic in me. Do you think that it's actually possible for the younger people right now to draw that line and to refuse to work for free, or are they trapped in a system that won't allow progression?
I think for now you're trapped in for right now. Like when we're talking about people that are Andrew's age, you know, in your early 20s, like those kinds of people for right now are going to have to probably just grin and bear the system that is. And then hopefully what happens is those people who have been exploited and recognize the exploitation that's happened get into roles where they can make the changes trickle down. So
yeah, there's just too much between education and corporate culture. There's just too many systemic forces weighing down, especially on our generation, for it can seem hopeless. And
the fact that if you don't take it, there's 40 other people behind you that will.
Yeah, and they're relying on that fact.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there's a certain amount of feeling trapped, but I also think it's also not an excuse not to work your ass off and get your money. Mm-hmm. Get that money.
That's right.
Let's go get that bread.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that is going to do it for our topics, guys. The show's running a little long tonight, so I'll leave it to you. Do we want to play our game and give Cody a chance to win it all tonight, or do we want to save it for next week?
I'm good to play.
Well, let's end it.
All right, let's end it. A lot on the line. This is Two Truths and a Gaming Lie, Gaming Edition, the musical, the series, Gaming Edition, the musical. And tonight, and the way this game works is I will have a very obscure game nobody's probably ever heard of. And I will then say 3 facts about this. 2 of those facts are true. 1 of them is a lie. Let's go to the scoreboard. All right. Cody, leading the pack with 9 points, 1 point away from victory. In second place, yours truly, me, with 8 points. How do I get points? Well, if the 2 of these guys can't identify which one is the lie, I get the point. And then bringing up the rear, mounting his comeback, Larry Hunt with a total of 1 point. 1 solo point. So
I deliberately got them all wrong until last week, so that this comeback would be epic. Get ready for 8 straight weeks of losing. 9 straight weeks. I mathed badly.
This week's game, Dead Space 2.
Ooh.
All right. I've got 3 facts here. You guys ready for it? Number 1. Several text logs refer to a deceased crew member named Dr. Frank Darden, the name of Bryan Cranston's character in the Dead Space movie that was released in 1991. Number 2. Halfway through the project, Activision hired away half of the development team to work at Sledgehammer Games. This is why a big part of the second half of the game consists of monster corridors. Number 3. Isaac's suit in the game weighs exactly 60 pounds. All right.
That's it?
Yep, that's it. So, Cody,
okay.
We are going to start with you. Which one of these is the lie? Bryan Cranston, Sledgehammer Games, 60 pounds.
This is tough. I know next to nothing about Dead Space 2.
Perfect.
I think I've only played the first one.
This is for all the marbles.
I know. Pressure's on. I'm gonna succumb to the pressure here. I think I'm gonna go with the second option.
With Sledgehammer Games. All right.
Although we've been talking a lot about corporate abuse, so very well could have been a real thing.
All right, Larry.
The suit weighing 60 pounds. That's where I'm going to go.
All right. And I get the point this week for the first time in a while. The Dead Space creators have actually been very adamant that their game is completely unrelated to the 1991 movie. So yeah. The way that we know that Isaac's suit weighs exactly 60 pounds is that there is a vendor that you go to. The very first shop, there is a scale that you can step on. If you do not have the suit on, you weigh 195 pounds. If you have the suit on, you weigh 255 pounds. So it weighs exactly 6 pounds. And yes, Activision did hire away half of the staff to come work at Sledgehammer Games, which is now no longer leading at least the development of games. They are only on a support role. And Visceral Games no longer exists.
Yes.
Oh,
Activision.
man. How the turntables have turned. All right, guys. That brings the score. Cody 9, me 9, Larry 1. Ooh. Next week, Get 2 ready. Of us are on match point. So Larry stays in it. You stayed alive, just not in the most advantageous way this week. So, all right, let's get out of here, guys. Who are you? Where can we find you? And what are you going to be tweeting about this week? Larry, let's start with you.
I'm Larry. You can find me on Twitter at StillInFlux. And I'll probably still be tweeting about pumpkin spice lattes. It's what I live for right now.
All right. Codsworth.
You can find me on Twitter at ProElectioneer. And I will probably be tweeting... Oh, man. I've been catching up on Succession. I don't know if either of you two watch this, but it is the best show on television right now and absolutely absurd. I just watched an episode that I have a lot of thoughts about, and so I can't wait to start seeing GIFs of this show.
What show is it?
Succession. It's an HBO show.
Oh, okay.
It's basically all of the conniving backstabbing of Game of Thrones, but in the world of like a media empire, like 3 children trying to duke it out for the succession of a kind of a Rupert Murdoch-esque media figure. It's basically that's a great satire of like corporate and wealthy America. It's absolutely fantastic and hilarious as well.
Oh man, that makes 2 HBO comedies I'm really interested in, because I also want to watch that new Danny McBride show.
Oh, The Righteous Gemstones?
Yeah.
It looks great.
I'm Luke. You can find me on Twitter at LukePVA. And this week I am going to just be tweeting at random games industry people, just telling them that they are cordially invited to Smash.
Maybe don't do that.
Hey, man.
Hey, I'm not going to ever be able to make it to this podcast again. Just wanted to give you a heads up.
Whoa.
I didn't know him.
What are you guys talking about? I just want them to know that they're going to be featured in the next Smash Brothers DLC.
Okay.
Guys, come on.
Jason Schreier announced his next character.
We would chase that rabbit hole a little bit longer if we weren't 2 hours into the show. Let's get out of here, guys. This has been PvA Radio. Each and every week we get together over here on twitch.tv/PvA Radio at 9:30 p.m. Eastern time on Wednesdays. Don't know if I said that. Each of us brings one of the biggest gaming news stories of the week. Then we have an in-depth discussion about it. Consider it your collaborative audio feature article, or your CAFA, if you will. And Larry, what do we want people to do with that?
You're going to set your alarm for 2 a.m. You're going to slip out of your bed quietly. You're going to slip quietly into your neighbors, quietly into their room. And as you're going to whisper, CAFA, so they dream about it. And you're also going to spam that emote in the chat.
That's right. If you can't watch us live, you can catch us the next day over on youtube.com/PvA Radio, where we post the entire episode or break it out topic by topic, whichever one you prefer. And if you want to just listen to our sultry voices, you can find us on podcast services everywhere. Wherever you're listening to us, we greatly appreciate it. Make sure you like, subscribe, leave a comment, review, all of those great, grand things. And until next week, guys, we love you and goodbye.
Why, that's the second biggest monkey head I've ever seen.
I used to be an adventurer like you. Then I took an arrow in the knee.
The definition of insanity.
Would you like me to pick up that shortwave radio?